Alright, this is Chat UCD. I'm going to start by talking about the growing noise around the manager and the managerial situation at United, specifically look at the suggestion that perhaps Gareth Southgate is a serious contender to replace Ruben Amorim should he be sacked. Look a little bit at the system and the pros and cons of changing it. Not that that would happen under Amorim, but just in general. And then a quick preview of the Chelsea game at the end. I did a video earlier in the week speaking about 31 points from 31 games from Amorim. I didn't realise it was that bad. And seeing it like that, it's awful. And I understand we've got shit owners and I understand there's limiting circumstances, and I understand we're never going to be what we were whilst this ownership structure is in place. It's not happening. However, I expect better than that, and I think most United fans expect better than that. And there has to be a line in the sand at some point. Look at the criteria we need right now for a manager of Man United. That's regardless of whether it's Ruben Amorim or someone else. And I think we need someone who's good at crisis management. We need a firefighter. We need someone who can build a stable footing from there, build a subculture, as I mentioned before, and work within limiting circumstances. And I ask, is that Ruben Amorim? Can he do those things? There's suggestions this week that the board expectations are that we qualify for Europe this season, because with the money that was been put in the summer, they think the squad's good enough to do that. I think that's debatable, and I don't mean that in a facetious, sarcastic way, like, well, that's debatable. I mean, genuinely, I think it's worthy of conversation. On the one hand, you think, right, we finished 15th last year, and we've added two established Premier League players in Mbeumo and Cunha, a young striker who's never played in the Premier League before and is unproven at this level, and obviously a very young goalkeeper and a left back who's never going to play. So is that enough? We haven't addressed the right wing back situation. We haven't got a midfield player. You could argue we haven't really addressed the goalkeeping situation, but anyway, you think, is that enough to go from 15th to a place in Europe? Well, to get in Europe, you're going to either have to win the FA Cup, and I don't know if they're even counting the Conference League as Europe or not, but I think you have to finish 7th, to get in that. So even if I think they're thinking Europa League, to be honest, the minimum, which would be 6th. So you're going from 15th to either 7th or 6th. That's 8 or 9 places. Have we got enough to do that? You could argue probably not. On the other hand, I look at our squad and look at some of the players and what they've done when they've been at other clubs, and think, you know what, with a better culture, maybe in a different system, maybe with a different manager, if a manager could come up with a subculture that I keep talking about, then it's not beyond the realms of possibility they could finish in the top 7 or 6 of the Premier League. But I think it's a big ask. Now, we can say the board are wrong for saying that we're not going to be able to get in Europe, and it's a wrong expectation. The fact is, as I've said before, they own the club, so they call the shots. They've got the keys to the castle, and if they say they expect Europe, then they expect Europe. And I suspect that if it becomes apparent early enough in the season that that's looking like it's going to be written off, I think they take the hit of the £12 million compensation for Amorim, in the hope that getting another manager in would salvage the season, and that £12 million would be repaid and more in terms of qualifying for Europe. I mean, there has been some suggestion to say that Amorim wouldn't even want compensation, that he said, if the board decide they don't want me, I'll walk away. I won't want any compensation. I don't know if he'll be true to that or not. There's another story suggesting that the club might wait until it's been a year, because within the first year it's going to cost them more. I mean, so they'd pay less compensation if it's been a year and they sack him. I mean, if that's the case and if that happens, then that's just very indicative, isn't it, of the penny pinching, money saving being more a priority than football. Because if you don't rate him, then I guess You need to act. Cheers. So on to the suggestions of Southgate. Where's the story coming from? Well, it's never really gone away. But Ben Jacobs was on the United stand yesterday, and he suggested that Jim Ratcliffe is a keen fan of Southgate. Mark Goldbridge then spoke about it in his video yesterday when he's previewing the Chelsea game, and was saying, you know, how ridiculous that is, how ridiculous that was. One of the comments was, obviously in the comments of the YouTube video, was someone had put, if we got Southgate, United will become a joke of a club. And I thought, become a joke of a club? Are we not already a joke of a club? I don't think you need Gareth Southgate to become a joke of a club. But I just want to talk a little bit more about Southgate, and it's a prickly subject, and I'm aware that this could alienate some people, and I know a lot of people will disagree with me, but I'm going to talk about it anyway because I have a slightly different perspective on him. It's possible to have a slightly different perspective without desperately wanting him to be the manager. I don't want him to be our next manager. My preference wouldn't be Gareth Southgate, but I'm going to give a slightly different perspective to what I think most United fans might have. Unlike a lot of United fans, I'm a big England fan. I'm very patriotic. I want us to do well. There were periods of time when I felt less connected to England, particularly when there was players from particularly Liverpool, but Chelsea, Arsenal back in the day, that I didn't like and that I hated every week, and then I was watching England supposedly cheering them on. That was a bit weird, particularly Liverpool players. Then there was a period where I just felt desperately disappointed with England, and players didn't seem to want to play for their country, which I think is unforgivable. And I kind of felt a little bit of, it seemed to have lost its meaning, to me anyway. And then Southgate came in 2017, I think, in preparation for the World Cup in 2018. And what I started to notice was that he implemented an ethos and a culture, and I talk a lot about ethos and culture at United, whereby players no longer seem to pull out of squads anymore. Players seem to want to play for their country again. Top players playing in the Champions League, winning league titles, seem to want to play for him and for England. And he'd developed an ethos and a culture specific to the needs of the England national football team. And what we saw then was semi-finals in 2018, the World Cup, reaching 2 European Championship finals, and for me being robbed in the quarter-final against France in the World Cup in Qatar. For me, over the last, probably over that time span actually, some of the highlights of my football watching experience have been watching England in those tournaments, because to be perfectly honest, watching United has been dire and just a reminder of what we've become. Probably the FA Cup final aside against City. So I think he did an incredible job with England. He has his limitations. I think his style of play is pragmatic, can be a bit boring. I think that's overstated at times. I think I watched England play some really good football at times against decent teams. But there are times when he definitely errs towards being quite pragmatic. In big games, when he needs to change, when he needs to adapt, he doesn't seem to know how to, and he doesn't make substitutions quickly enough. And when we need to, he errs on the side of caution when I think we need to remove caution and throw caution to the wind. He's missed out on some big opportunities, I guess, as England manager. But I'd say the pros far outweigh the cons, and he's second only to Sir Alf Ramsey in terms of the echelons of England managers. Statistically, he is, and people can talk about missed opportunities against Croatia and Italy. But I must say, I would invite those people to do your history lesson and look back at England over a period of time. England don't get to semi-finals. England don't get to finals over a 50-year period, encompassing some great players and on paper some great teams. So I think the level of, and I'm going to call it ridicule, the level of ridicule attached to him is disproportionate. He might not be people's cup of tea, but I respect what he did for England. And I think as a United fan base, I'm not sure we've got too much room to be too snobby about the suggestion that he could be our manager. And I see people scoffing, Gareth Southgate, fuck off. Well, we just finished 15th and we've got 31 points from 31 games. And we haven't been near a title race in 12 years. And the standards of the club are on the floor. So I'm not sure we can be so snobby we turn our nose up at him. I said the other day, had he have come in last October and got 31 points from 31, there'd be uproar. There'd be uproar a few months ago, I think, with the record that Amrim had, if it was Southgate that had it. And I think, and I can't prove this, but I think had he have come in, I think he'd have done better. I think he'd have got more than 31 points. I can't prove that, like I said, but I think he would. I think the board might look at it as they've got nothing to lose. It's shit anyway. They know people are going to not be happy about it, but they can't be that bothered about that. You know, they're not been bothered about upsetting United fans to this point. It's an itch they might want to scratch because it's a story that doesn't go away. If he comes in, it doesn't work out, they'll bin him off, they'll get someone else. It's just as likely that happens with Glasner or the guy from Bournemouth or Marco Silva, whoever else is linked with United anyway. So if it's something they want, they've got to have conviction and go for it. And in terms of the fans, will they be up in arms about it? Yeah, to start with. But you and I both know that United fans, as I've said before, they haven't got anarchy in them. After a game or two of doing all right and maybe a couple of half-decent press conferences where he makes the right sounds, the vast majority of the fan base will say, I've got to get behind the manager. He's experienced, he would be free, no compensation. He is the builder of, in terms of his background with England at least, he built an ethos, he built a culture. I think he could build a subculture away from the Glazers and Ineos. I know he was an FA man, but the team and the environment he created within England was specific to the needs of that team and what we needed as England fans, or I needed as an England fan. At United, could he do the same? I don't know, but he certainly has got history of building that ethos and that culture very specific to the team and the needs of that team. And I think that's massively underestimated, because you can talk forever more about styles of play and whether a manager has an attractive style of play, but without a culture that goes with it, you're not going to get the style of play anyway. We've seen that with Amrim. Amrim came in with a reputation for playing good football, and he's done a lot of good things, by the way, in terms of trying to rid the dressing room of certain characters and things, but he's still not imprinted his way. It's not translated and to the players, and he hasn't built that subculture. Maybe he needs longer, but he hasn't up to this point created a subculture, and therefore his style of play is just not there. In fact, it's boring. It's shit to watch. And he's a manager that's got a good record. So it can't. A record of producing attractive teams. So it doesn't matter. The football's crap anyway. So unless you get that subculture, unless you get that ethos, unless you get the best out of what you've got, then it can be Gareth Southgate, it can be Ruben Amorim, it can be Marco Silva, whoever. You've got to have that about you, and I think he's got that about him. He walked into institutionalised apathy and failure when he walked into the England job and completely turned it around. And as I said, made it, for me as an England fan, made me invested again. I go back to the criteria for success I mentioned before, not the club. The club want Europe. I'll come back to that in a minute. But what I said was, let me just remind myself. We need a manager that's a firefighter, crisis management, building a stable footing, build a subculture and work within limited circumstances. Can he crisis manage? I'm not sure. I think he put out a few fires when he first went into the England job. I think it comes back to the culture. He created a subculture very quickly, which meant then you put out fires. But I'm not sure whether that's his forte. But building a stable footing, something that's just steady to start with, which let's face it, our form is that of a team that would finish 17th. So we need a stable footing to start with. I think he'd be quite good at that. I think he would build a subculture. He'd certainly have a go at it, and I think working within limited circumstances. 50-50 on that one. I'm not too sure. In terms of getting into Europe, could he come in and oversee that? I don't know. Genuinely don't know. I'm not sure. But what you're looking at here is, forget whether you like him or not. I think at times people dismiss him because they don't like him. Look at whether you think he could do a better job than Ruben Amorim, and he can do a better job than the other people that are being mentioned. And I don't know whether he could or not. But what I'm saying is, I want to make this really clear. I'm not championing Gareth Southgate or wanting him to be the manager of Man United. I'm saying that for me, it's not as outlandish as other people are talking about, and that it should be completely dismissed out of hand. Because this is where we are now. We're not a club chasing titles. We're not a club chasing top four. Gone are the days where we would go out and get the best manager that's out there. They won't come. And it wouldn't work. And I think Ruben Amorim was one of the best young managers out there when we went last season to market. And look at what's happened. We need a firefighter. We need someone who can come in and do the bare basics well. So, don't want him particularly, but as I said, to dismiss it so quickly and dismiss it out of hand, and I think the hate he gets is for me, it's unnecessary. People are entitled to their opinion, but I think at times people just don't like him as a person, and people do like Ruben Amorim, but look at his record. Not about whether you like someone or not. I can't stand Jose Mourinho, but if he came back to Man United now, I think he'd do a better job than Ruben Amorim. Anyway, let's just talk a bit about the system. There was something I saw the other day, a video talking about the system. There's loads of videos and clips about the system. It's a point of obsession to the media. And Ruben Amorim's made it very clear that he's not going to change his system. So when I talk now about a different system, I'm talking about it would be a different manager, because it's not going to be Ruben Amorim. But there was a few things in the video. I think it was Alex Crook from TalkSport, who I'm not normally a massive fan of, but I think he made quite a bit of sense with what he was talking about regarding the system. If United changed it, the benefits of that. The benefit of this system as stands, for me, one of the only ones I can see, is the three at the back, suiting the centre-backs. Our centre-backs that we've got, I would worry about any of them in a two. I think the best two, if we were playing four at the back, would be De Ligt and Yoro. Martinez obviously would come in, but he's quite injury prone. Shaw could probably come into that. Harry Maguire's not great in a two. I think he's blossomed in that three. Aidan Heaven, is unproven, but I think all of our centre backs look better in a three. The benefits of changing back to four at the back, and people say, well, it's changing back to a 4-3-3. We weren't playing 4-3-3 under Ten Hag. We were playing 4-2-3-1. We've been playing 4-2-3-1 since Ferguson retired. 4-3-3 is different. But if you play four at the back, let's just say 4-3-3, the benefits of that is any formation with wingers, basically. The benefit of that would be, I think Ahmad would blossom if he got in the team, because right now he's being asked to play two positions which aren't his positions. He's not a 10 or an inside right, and he's not a wing back, he's a winger. So I think he would benefit. I think Bruno would probably benefit, because even if he's not playing in the furthest advanced attacking midfield role, he'd have more around him to make up for his positional ill discipline, and I think he'd have a freer role. the other thing that I like about a 4-3-3 system is the variations of it. You'd have 4 at the back, that's standard, but then 3 in front of that can change quite a bit. You could have 3 who are all relatively close to your back line if you're trying to play counter-attacking football. You could have 1 holding and 2 in advance. You could have 2 holding and 1 in advance. You could almost have 3 in a straight line. And then up front, obviously, it's a left winger, a centre forward, and a right winger. So I think it's relatively flexible, and I think with the players we've got, it probably would suit that system better. The problem is, we've got, what do you do with Mbeumo and Cunha then? Where do they fit into that? They've been bought. They're the only 2 players that have been the specialist buys really for an Amorim system, for where specialist buys for where how he wants to play. So those 2, not those 2 as in like they've done anything wrong, because they're both really good players, but those 2 signings are going to be a problem if the manager stays, because they're going to have to play, and that means that it's caused more issues than it's solved with the midfield, as we spoke about on here before. And if the manager leaves and a new manager comes in and plays a different system, where do you play those players, because they've been bought for this system? So as I say, it's speculative, I suppose, but I've never really spoken too much about the system before. He's not going to change it, as I mentioned, so it's if a new manager comes in. But I think there's more pros than cons to changing it if a new manager came in. For what it's worth, let's look at Chelsea coming up tomorrow. I expect improvement, I expect endeavour, I expect energy, I expect the crowd to be up for it. It's a tea time kickoff. Nights are drawing in a bit more now. I think there's always a better atmosphere under the floodlights at Old Trafford. As much as I hate saying it, this is a game where we're big underdogs, so we tend to do better in those types of games. I think everyone will be up for it, and I expect to see more aggression, more snappiness. Both Mason Mount and Cunha apparently are in the squad. Can't imagine they'll start, but they're in the squad, which gives us more flexibility as to what we can do. But whilst I do see all of those positives tomorrow, I still don't think we'll win the game, because this team doesn't know how to win games. It doesn't know how to be consistent throughout a game. It has periods of games where it looks decent, and even when we play well for most of a game, we don't tend to win it because we're not clinical enough in front of goal, and we make too many mistakes at the back or in the midfield, and then that affects the back, whichever way you want to look at it. They haven't got the wherewithal to get results. If we don't win tomorrow, that would be 8 wins in 32. That's 1 win every 4 games under Amorim. I mean, that is so poor. I mean, I look back to, I can't remember if it was Ollie or Jose. We played Chelsea towards the back end, like Easter sort of time of a season around that era. And we were about 6th. And Chelsea were, if I remember rightly, challenging for a title. I think it was under Conte. And they came to Old Trafford, massive favourites. We weren't fancied at all in that game. And whoever the manager was put Herrera on Eden Hazard. And Herrera marked him out of the game. And the game plan was sit deep, sit tight, Herrera kick the shit out of Hazard, and use your pace on the counter-attack. I think he put Rashford up front. And we won 2-0. Talking about it, it's a Mourinho performance. I would imagine it was Mourinho. And it was a crackling atmosphere, and we won against the odds, and it was fantastic. What you have to remember about that is, in that era, we were finishing between 4th and 6th, which I thought at the time was completely unacceptable. But you're a half-decent team if you're finishing between 4th and 6th. This team's just finished 15th. As I've mentioned, this team on merit over a 31-game period are around 17th in the Premier League. So, as much as I hate saying that, it's true. We're an underdog team. So I don't think they've got the wherewithal to go and beat Chelsea tomorrow. I think it'd be a draw or a defeat, unfortunately. Covered a few things there today, and I know that, as I said earlier, the stuff about Southgate in particular might be a prickly subject, but I'm not going to shy away from what I think and my perspective. He wouldn't be my choice of manager, but I believe you have to look at all of the different factors here, not just whether you like him or not, and what United might need and what the board want. And I think his performance as England manager is for me too harshly criticised. Just my opinion. Glazers out.